Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
It's probably the best kept secret in India.
Family-owned business, which has been extremely clinical in their approach. They have not hesitated ever to kill their darlings.
Typical to a South Indian business empire, I think they've shunned the limelight almost deliberately.
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
From fragile 5 to top 5, from a laggard to a leader, India under Modi has reimagined the world order. Presenting the second edition of TV9, What India Thinks Today. Summit theme, India poised for the next big leap. Listen to Prime Minister Modi unveil his vision for Viksit Bharat at News 9 Global Summit, a TV9 network initiative.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
You are watching Last Take here on News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar, and joining me in the studio is my colleague and friend Suyash Maheshwari. Suyash, talk to us. An eventful day for the markets. Nifty topping the 22,200 mark. Sensex closing up above nearly 350 points.
Definitely a historic day for the markets, Krishna. Indian markets now, they have scaled a record high for the second day in a row. On the whole, we are on a 6-day winning run, and as you rightly pointed out, Nifty for the very first time has climbed above 22,200 mark. We just settled about a shade below that at 22,196 sort of levels, up 0.3%. But we are in uncharted territory, and I think a lot of our viewers would like to know how do they pretty much position themselves in the market currently. And if we extrapolate the Fibonacci levels from the record low, not actually from the record low, from the very recent low of about 21,137 to the previous record high of 22,126, the next resistance zone for the index comes in at around 22,395 mark. Now that's a 127.2% Fibonacci extension levels. If we project it out further, 22,535 will pose as resistance 2, and it could pose as resistance 2 because that is a 141.4% Fibonacci extension level. On the downside, the first support will of course come in at around 126 to 130 sort of levels, because remember that was the previous record high, and that is the level from which Nifty has reversed course at least twice in the past. In fact, we have seen sharp corrections from those levels. On the first instance, the index declined by about 900 points from there. In the second instance, 700 points. In fact, even this morning, we dropped about 100 points from there, but the market were able to bounce from there and scaled a record high. But talking about Sensex, now that has rescaled 73,000, and that's after a gap of nearly 12 sessions. But we are about still 400 points shy of the record highs for Sensex. The broader markets, Krishna, now they have snapped.
Right, that's what's interesting. Usually, the way Indian markets have been going, the bull run of late, whatever happens in Nifty or Sensex, the mid cap and the small cap indices always end up in the green, but that's not the case for today.
Definitely not the case for today, but
as a matter of being overheated in the mid cap and small cap space?
Certainly, but time and again, since at least from October, we have seen there that both the mid cap and the small cap indices would see one day of a shakeout where both indices would give up around 3 to 4% of their gains, but the recovery has always been strong and it would be immediate. In the next couple of sessions, the market is pretty much able to retrace what was lost. And in fact, even if you look at today's price action, nothing concerning, about a 0.5% cut for the small cap index. The mid cap index is down marginally. They are holding above their crucial support zone so far, but I think what bulls will really like is that volatility declined slightly today. We were near 16.5, which is a 52-week high for the India VIX. Although India VIX settled, about 0.3% higher, we are back knocking at 16 sort of levels, which historically speaking is still elevated. But considering how the markets are currently positioned and how we are at record high, and volatility generally is high, when markets are at record levels, it would be good to see some respite coming on that front. But let's also talk about what were the major drivers of today's rally, and it was the banking pack. Nifty Bank, surged by about 1%, and it was able to topple 47,000, and that was after a gap of a month. In fact, if we look at the performance of Nifty, just 3 stocks were responsible for 60% of all the gains that came for Nifty today. That was Axis Bank, Kotak and HDFC Bank. 60% of all the gains came from just 3 of these stocks. In fact, a special word on HDFC Bank, because that was a major driver of the for the markets today.
And considering what has been happening with the HDFC Bank stock of late, how would you talk about today's performance in that context?
Now, Krishna, as I mentioned, HDFC Bank, it had been forming a base below that around 1350, 1380 sort of levels for quite some time now. Even after that rally where we saw, a couple of months back, where the stock rescaled 1700 sort of levels, it, declined from there on and took support at those levels. And it seems that this time we are finally making a base around those levels. It's too early to say that the stock has bottomed out, because of course, there are some troubles not just for HDFC Bank, but for the banking, banking stocks at large. But talking about today's movement specifically, 43% of the gains for Nifty came just from HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank, alone rallied by about 2.6%, and that was on the back of a buy call from Citi. Now they have given a target price of 2050, which implies an upside of over 40% from current levels. And we also have a lot of positive commentary on HDFC Bank specifically. And if you look at private banks versus public sector banks, the private banks had been the laggard for the last year or so, and we are we are finally seeing them performing and taking over the public sector banks.
Fair enough. So that's the reason why you have HDFC, Axis, Kotak, IndusInd Bank and barring Bank of Baroda, everything else the private bank that's been gaining for the day. And it wasn't just about the banks as far as the top gainers for the day was the case, wasn't it?
Yes, apart from the banks, of course, banks were the major driver, but media stocks, they did fairly well. And I think most of the gains from that pack came from Z Entertainment. Of course, the stock was up about 6% or so, 7% actually. On an intraday basis, it surged as much as 12%, and that was of course on the back of reports that Sony and Z, now they are making one final attempt at closing in that $10 billion merger that was shelved last month. Of course, there are other reports as well which suggest that even if the merger does not happen, the lawyers of Sony and Z are working together to thrash out an out-of-court settlement. Of course, we at News9 have not been able to independently verify these reports. Neither has Sony or Z commented or said anything in that regard. But clearly the market is smelling something, because you know, a 7% rally in the stock price, you don't see it every day.
Fair enough. I just want to ask you about the volatility index for the day as well. You know, it's up in the red 0.32%, but it's at over 16.
Yes. See, as I mentioned earlier, historically speaking, 16 levels are elevated, but you have to put it in the context of how the market has been in the last 1 month or so. You know, we are past all those major events. The budget is done. Monetary policy, both in US and India, is behind us. The Q3 earnings are behind us. So one would expect the volatility to decline. But now, since we are lacking triggers, the market is also, you know, very unsure about the direction it has to take. And that's why we are seeing a spike in volatility. And most of these cues that we now will focus on is perhaps going to come from the US markets, which, by the way, were closed yesterday on Monday on account of President's Day. And they reopened back, and they will first react to the wholesale inflation data that came out on Friday, which was hotter than expected. So the expectation is that we could see a bit of a sentimental impact for the US markets, and that could take a toll on Asian markets and Indian markets as well. And we can see that reflect in the performance of the IT pack. Now, the IT stocks, they took a beating. They were down about 0.83% in today's trade. In fact, they were the worst performing sector.
Clearly down, the entire IT pack down nearly 1% for the day. So that sort of wraps up the day's trading session for us. Suyash, thank you so much for putting the day's trading session into perspective. And with that, we are slipping into a short breather here on the programming. But before we go into that break, here's a very important programming note, because we are counting down to the big event, that is News 9, that is organizing this coming weekend. The News 9 Global Summit is about the new India that is recognized as a rising economic power and a major global player. The theme of this year's summit is how India is poised for the next big leap. The What India Thinks Today Summit is being organized by the TV9 Group, and this edition of the summit is unmissable because the keynote address is by none other than India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What India Thinks Today Summit is being held on the 25th, 26th and the 27th of February. Make sure you tune in to all the action.
From Fragile 5 to Top 5, from a laggard to a leader, India under Modi has reimagined the world order. Presenting the second edition of TV9, What India Thinks Today. Summit theme, India poised for the next big leap. Listen to Prime Minister Modi unveil his vision for Viksit Bharat at